Today is Monday, November 4th. Welcome back, Dan.
Thanks for having me. Good to be.
Let's start. My pleasure. Let's start with the latest, one of the latest article in the New York Times. They're talking about that Russia is advancing, Ukraine is losing, and what's happening right now in the United States that they're talking this way.
Well, I think the whole thing has been running out of steam for a very long time. And the only difference, between the so called candidates, which is corporate selected hand puppets, is that they're Democrats are kicking the can down the road just to get to tomorrow. Let's be honest, they don't give a damn about what happens after tomorrow. They have zero interest in the people of Ukraine, of the territory, of the history, of anything, even when they've spent billions of dollars, well, our money, really, hundreds of billions of dollars of the people's money to make all this happen. They don't give a shit about anything past November 5th. And so when you come up to the other thing about Trump saying, he can, what was he, I'll be, uh, the day after I win, I'll start it and that'll be done by the time I take office. Wasn't that what he said in one of the debates or something by January? It sounds like Reagan talking about Vietnam, 50 years ago. We could paint it, pave it, and put parking stripes on it and be home in time for Christmas. You know, and it's almost like they don't need any geographical anchor or any political anchor. It's like they're reverends in some sort of disembodied chorus, and they're just spouting and they keep shouting and spouting, and it doesn't really matter where they are, or it's like they're in a balloon floating over the world, and they'll say, now the thing about this country is, do you know what country we're over, sir? Well, it's obviously in Europe somewhere. They don't. Well, so when you get back to why is this happening now, and I think there is, I think that the fair, not fair, but kind of generous idea would be to say, hey, stop clock is right twice a day, right? Somebody must know something. But I don't even give them, I don't think they deserve that much praise. I think that it's been obvious to so many of us for so long, and they finally have to say something that sounds like enough of the truth that they can cynically go along with, as if they always uh, had this in mind, right? Who's in favor of apartheid in South Africa? Who thinks it's a good idea to oppose the ANC and call them terrorists? And oh no, no. 30 years later, the dust settles, the fog clears. Everyone always knew going on. And what they do is they plant these little truth bombs, like seeds in a reforestation of the Sahara or something. How they do this thing where they drop like 1 million cones of seedlings, and then something will take, and then we'll say, oh yeah, that was us all along. So I mean, first of all, it's the New York Times, right? I mean, I don't even, I can't even. You asked me to come and talk about it, and I have a vested interest in doing so. But as soon as you say the New York Times, like kind of like my eyes glaze over. I'm like, oh God, what did they say now? Like, all the news that fits, we'll print it. That's what should be their moniker. But they are starting to say that, yes. And the other thing, I guess this was a German publication. I'm not sure. It's my head is spinning kind of now, but on the same on that same trajectory, telling the truth at the very end, but then stepping up, using it as as new ammunition, like the whole idiocy about how North Korea is going to invade Ukraine, right? That's what we really have to be careful of, and we better act, we better do something. Like Ukraine is losing, so we have to do even more. That I forget it was SPD. I think it was a German source, but I'm not really sure. It's like, wow, you finally getting a whiff of the truth, and you're taking exactly the wrong message from it. It's amazing, but it shows you either they're evil, and they just use it for propaganda no matter what it says, or they are really stupid and they can't they look at something 2 + 2 is 4. That's what I said, 5. What? No, that you can't go on and do this. And the thing is that the blood is already shed and the history is already written. This has been a done deal forever. And the next person, or I guess it's not really fair to call them people. The candidates for president are just Manchurian kind of candidates, like machines. And they are going to come out of the box swinging and fighting for the next war, the next thing, the next new thing to conquer. And it's like either boring or embarrassing for that to still be Ukraine. Even the Democrats have given up, right? Trump wisely said from the very beginning, and he was painted with all that Russian crap that was, completely disassembled and called out for the lies that it was, but it gives him a little distance. So the next move is maybe shore up Israel if they can, and do something about Taiwan. That's really the next chapter. And I guess because we're teachers, right? So we kind of look at what would a kid do? Like they're looking for an easy way to write the same essay and get credit for it again without changing. Dude, you didn't even change the title. I mean, it's the same font. It's the same. Oh my God, 375 words, no sources. You use the same sources and you're talking about a different part of the globe. Well, yeah, but I thought it sounded good this time too. But a lazy student would give a professor. And this is what they're trying to pass as international politics. It's amazing to watch. It's like, I don't know. Here I go laughing again. Everyone will say, I laugh too much. How can I laugh about something so repulsive, right? But
By by now, I think we can surely say that there is an ideological concept toward Russia in Washington. Do you think any of these two candidates is capable of reshaping that ideological concept, or they're going to go along with the same kind of mindset, strategy, or because the way that they're talking about the conflicts, both of these candidates, is different. But when it comes to how they're going to implement what they're talking about, do you think they're going to be the same? Or are we going to have a little bit of difference when it comes to what they're capable of doing? I'm
I,
not talking about what they're talking about.
right. I see what you mean. I shook my head because I know, I'm getting old. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but I can't see the difference that you're talking about. Like obviously I interpret, my mind takes it in and then says, oh, what she's really saying is nothing. Okay. What he's really saying is I'll try to do the same thing, but I'll call it something different so that I look like maverick and an independent and someone who is not bound by the dictates of my position. Uh, and I really don't think, um, I think again, I could, I could be accused of being lazy, but I don't think it's worth the intellectual energy to kind of parse their words and split those hairs. I don't think it is like a circus clown dressed in blue and another one dressed in white. And you say, or red, I guess, right? Isn't that the color scheme we agreed on, or nobody agreed on, but is now absolutely unallowable to see it in any other way, right? Red, bad, blue, good, or the other way around. So these are different characters in this kabuki theater, and they are presenting something this way, but it really isn't. I mean, it's in what you said. We've come so far that there's an ideological bent, and it makes me again think of a teaching moment when you say, like, you tell a kid, like, look, you got to find the source, or science. You're building a hypothesis, and you're trying to build an experiment that will test that hypothesis and prove it positive or negative, right? So that there is some sort of a building or some sort of a rational, and the way it works, actually, especially for the West and for the US in particular, is that you're starting with the ideology. They never had anything. That's what the hypothesis was already written. It was already done about being anti-Russia. The whole concept of being anti-Russia. Think of it, Nima. How could you get to the ditch Tchaikovsky, get rid of Stolichny? Not Stolichny is not Russian vodka, but a Russian vodka. Don't do, I mean, unless you're starting way off of center, that's not a rational position. It's not something you can build toward. It's things that you find along the road that you pick up and throw in the truck because that's a good one. That's a good one too. Freedom fries. I love that one because that was one of the stupidest. Someone pointed out that Frankfurter, right, was a German they got rid of that and called it the hot dog. I had forgotten that because that's way old. That's 2-3 wars ago. So it's like. And that's how Americans count their history. What movie was it? What movie was it in? And what war was it part of? And you don't need maps. They don't need, as Mark Twain said, that's how Americans learn geography, by the wars they're involved in. It's the only reason they know the map. Philippines, that's over. Oh yeah, that's like south of China. I think, wait, I don't know. Is the world round? So, I don't think they're gonna do anything different from each other, except, and I've come to, well, the point I was just trashing was to say that this was irrational when it was ideological from the beginning. But I will backtrack a little bit to talk about that election process. Is that I thought these are two idiots spending other people's money to prove the other guy wet his bed when he was 7. That's American democracy. That's what we call it. But I've seen in the past few weeks, like, this woman is absolutely horrible. She's like a cipher, like a mirage. There's nothing. You can say what you want about Donald Trump because we've all been saying it for 50 years. Everyone knows what he might do, how it will work, what this will do. And there is, on the other side, is nothing. Absolutely nothing. She can't think out loud. She can't talk to reporters. She can't do anything without cackling to herself. It's a an absolute rubber stamp of the status quo. So what that tells me is that you know exactly what will happen under that regime, because there is no change at all. People won't even, bother to change their stationery. Just cross out the Biden and underline the Harris on your office letterhead from Department of bomb the world and take what you can get. I think that's a special appointment under this administration, and so that is incredibly dangerous, I think, in terms of what happens tomorrow. And I will say I do think that matters on the ground in the Ukraine. I mean, I think that there is, Zelensky is wondering how long he has to live. The Western provinces are wondering if they can get through another winter without having all of their facilities, their lights put out. And the Russians are blithely, basically above it all. They don't really care who wins tomorrow. And I think that what Zelensky's faction has been hoping is that the need to prove something by the 5th, it would make it, if I raise a stink about North Koreans, if I try to work on Suja or Kursk, then something will happen. I'll get something that I need before the elections. But then you have the Russian advances are completely broad. I mean, from north to south, just all along the line of contact. In Suja, they just took, or they're being kind of smug, not smug, but what do I mean? Tight-lipped about what's been going on in the past couple of days. They took basically 1,000 square kilometers of territory, maybe like 2,000 prisoners in the Kursk area. Also, there have been things showing, just like we talked about the other day with Iran and Israel, about people having their phones. They have their phones everywhere. Everybody has phones. There's always some sort of video. So there are people in downtown Kiev talk. Oh, hey, look, there's a Russian drone, and they have extended video of Russian drones flying completely freely, unimpeded over Kiev. And so even people on the street are talking and saying, wow, there is no close air support and there's no air defense left. Like, what does this mean? Well, another thing that it means, which is just that you get from listening to all these, there are all these, I know a lot of the academics call it war porn, there are a bunch of podcasters and people who are filtering tons and tons of reports and stuff like that. And there are interesting details that come up, although I don't think that counting like that is necessarily very, very helpful. But one of the things is that the science of these geranium or the Russian drones has advanced in a special way during the SMO. And that is that almost always they've been, tasked before they're set off. You're supposed to go and, penetrate this thing, blow up this thing, target this. And they have more and more developed the ability to be untasked, which means that the operator can then find things. And what this says, at least unofficially, is in Kiev, like we're looking for, people. I mean, we're looking for Zelensky or other members of the government or something And we have the capability of doing that without any without much resistance, even though fighting is still fierce on the front lines, but they have enormous capabilities. And the crumbling is it isn't even a question. It's when you define it. You wait for the second flag to be raised over the Reichstag in Berlin, because the first one was the sign of the invading platoon or whatever, and then but you want a Russian flag or a red flag, so the next day or 12 hours later. In other words, how long do you wait before you call it crumbling or total destruction? It is it's just mind blowing, how it's just plodding along on one level, and completely, Zelensky himself told people like they should run if you have to. If it turns out that the only choice is surrender or die, then you should run. And that's not that's incredible that someone who's been running this puppet show for that long is just kind of no longer. I don't think it's not interested, but it's how could you just pull the plug like that? What comes next? What happens? And that's what we're gonna find out, I guess.
Is Russia concerned about the future of conflict in Ukraine, in your opinion, or they are just understanding that the United States will not be interested in the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine? Because it's not just about the United States. We know how the European Union is totally involved in this conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Even if Donald Trump wins, he would have a lot of difficulties in dealing with the European Union. The way they sacrificed even Germany. Look at Germany, what has happened to Germany. How do they convince the European Union?
Yeah.
For instance, Germany.
I think that is an amazingly profound question, because I really cannot see how, like we were talking earlier about how it's wound up being mostly, religious or ideological. But the trouble is that the Americans were never serious about it on the same level anyway. Look at it. They had no problem blowing up German gas. This was going to help. There's one of the things that Brzezinski warned about, and I don't know, probably Kissinger. I don't know, he's 117 now, so I don't know when he would have done that. But uniting Russia and Germany with a common economic purpose or forward march, kind of. And if you don't admit that that's what you're doing all along, what happens when you do pull the plug? And I think this is going to be incredibly, yes, it's going to be a strain, not just for Trump, but for the Western Europeans, etc. And what about the East? What about Poland? What about the Baltics? It's on these people. These have been completely traumatized and like euthanized or exploited by Western capital interests from the 80s, really, from the ending and the demise of the control of the Soviet Union to the first days of freedom, they had actual, helicopters full of cash flying around 12 or 24 hours ahead of the bank float so that they could make an extra million in a day or three. And the cynical and tragic kind of outlook of the Chicago boys, this Friedmanite capital like thieves, disaster capital swoop in vultures. And that's been going on for 30 years. And so there are two outcomes that are both, I think, really sad. And one is that the thing I mentioned from German, I'm pretty sure now it was a German source that said, now if we can't let this go, meaning kind of if the Americans pull out, then we have to fill the gap because we can't let Russia get away with this. And so, well, get away with what? What are you talking about? That's the other outcome, which is the sense of complete betrayal that the U.S. and there was a Marshall Plan for Western Europe. There was a similar plan for Japan after the last great conflict. After the end of the Cold War, or at least the fall of the Soviet Union, there was nothing of the sort. They were just using these puppets to kick their own can a little more down the road, to keep the empire in control and to keep the old man standing, even though his legs were given out and Uncle Sam couldn't walk without a cane. They just, no, here's the dollar, use the dollar, all looking then. What is the worst thing is eventually the plan they've had in PNAC and all these people to break up Russia into 3 or 4 different mini states and just continue the piecemeal devouring of all those natural resources. And all of the Eastern European countries are in that trap and have been, and their ideology and their rushing to base their whole political ethos on being against Russia and being pro-Western and pro-European, pro-EU. And then you have the Western, the mega powerhouses that are losing all their steam, basically with the really, really obvious help of the United States. And they're supposed to just swallow it and move on. I think it's shocking, but it's kind of like seeing, a couple, like, why the hell did he get with her? Well, they're both my friends. I don't want to step in and say, like, he's an idiot. And then you find out he was cheating on you the whole time. Well, I know, honey, everyone knew that. Everyone could see that. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have anywhere for you to go, because there's nothing left. And I think one of the things you mentioned was reconnecting, either Germany, Russia, or Western Europe, or certainly Eastern Europe. I think there are some like Hungary, potentially Serbia, maybe Slovakia, like there have been moves along these lines. But in general, I really think that the Russians are sick to death of it. I mean, everyone in the West has this talk about the ideology. It also makes them like academic kindergartners or something, that they couldn't, there was always Putin kills every journalist, steals all the money, and makes all the decisions himself. So, what can you do? It's us versus authoritarianism. Democrats say this now. That's why they promote all these wars, because the new us versus them is democracy versus authoritarianism. What kindergarten did you get your college degree from? Like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And the fact is that the Russians, the president of Russia, with the votes and with the deep, deep historical, personal, emotional, economic support of a very active people, 150 million people, thought it's wise enough to put a line in the sand and say, no way, we're not doing this again. We're not doing another Barbarossa, another Napoleon. We're not gonna, we can't. And so to think that you would just either snap your fingers or have some bullshit theory. Oh, well, we were, like the Americans always do, and say, well, Juan Guaido, he was, I know he wasn't president, but he's still on your stationery. Your stationery still says this guy is president. He got like 14 votes, and I mean, what are you saying? But that's how we always seem to approach it. And the Russians, and this is not just getting Putin out of the way, which is another one of their bizarre, like fairy tale, crazy things. That's how the broader question would be: how can you restructure the Russian mindset so that we can get them to conveniently forget the last 85 years of history? Yeah, that's a tough one. Let's think that out for a minute. And they'll come up with some answer to that. But there isn't. There's no way that those relationships are going to be restructured, because they've been stomping on them and killing them forever. And the real question is this idea of bratstvo, mudrost narodnaya, the bond, the people's bond between the peoples, between the Slavic peoples. And that's where the Russians started out with. It wasn't just Putin's rhetoric. This is 1,000 years of history. But you have a nation that has been imploded, has basically been reseeded with billions of dollars of CIA money about teaching their kids how to jump and dance and say, kill the Russians, kill the Muscali, kill the Muscali. All of this stuff, having these camps, the summer camps for both their young teenagers and international neo-Nazis, right, for years. And they have managed to sculpt a whole belief system, this neurotic kind of supremacy, basically transplanting U.S. What do we call it? In not individualism, can't be denied. Oh, geez, see, this is I hit my head like 2 years ago, and I still have trouble with memory. The indispensable nation. Yeah. We are the one, right? And that's what they did to Ukraine. They had a good kernel to pop too. They had really that was going back to Bandera and the Galicia and actual Nazis. It's the same as Israel, as having this very broadly based religious, or in the Ukrainian case, maybe not exactly religious, but it's pretty religious. It's pretty much a steadfast, irrational belief, that idea that they are something special. And then obviously you're not going to rebuild the relationship with your Slavic cousins and brothers, because your entire ethos Ukrainstvo, the Ukrainianness is built on non-Russianness. So what? So then what? I think it's like asking what. I don't. I don't want to look judgmental because I cannot imagine Americans ever doing it. I can't imagine us getting away from, out of what is going to happen. An enormous military defeat would have to be the beginning to make a whole populace kind of rethink what happened with the Germans. I think it's still going on. It certainly was something that the West exploited with Operation Paperclip and Operation Gladio and all this stuff. What happens in the South Americas after in El Salvador, in Guatemala, in Chile after Pinochet? How did they get beyond that? What do white South Africans say now? Is that, what about apartheid? And you're trying to cobble back together something that was blasted to smithereens and made a country basically go insane. You can take that to the bank. I don't think anyone's going to give me any money for having said that, but I think that this is very much what the U.S. did on purpose within a proxy that was well trained and pumped and stabilized by Western interests. So much so that they found themselves in a war that they can't win and can't end. There's some other rumor that elements of Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, the Ukrainian parliament, said that if they can't, we have to mobilize more. If we can't get 160,000 men before the end of this year, then we will have to surrender. And now, and also speaking of phones and stuff, you have hundreds of examples of people attacking the kidnappers, they call them, the people who are dragging their brothers and sons, fathers away to this war, and mobilizing by sneaking up on people in the grocery store, taking everyone that they can find. And this is an anathema. This is absolutely stretching that idea to its breaking point. That could be part of how this is restructured, that there will be a groundswell of people who say, like Poroshenko. Poroshenko said on his own, if we had Zelensky run against Putin here tomorrow, Zelensky would lose. And this is the guy who started the ATO at the first march into Donbass. And I don't know why he's out of the firing line, but that's is the truth that you can get from former oligarchs who held the position for a little while before what's his name bought this one for Zelensky. It's a, like I said, the details are almost I don't want to say boring, but depressing in that they're only different in style and specifics from the details of the puppets, of what happened with Savak. What happens to the black soldiers who were the muscle for the South African Defense Force. What happens, and what is going to happen to Israel if Israel becomes a rump state that's unable to defend itself except by self-imposed decree, so that they are not hurting anybody anymore or threatening anybody. What happens to that mindset? And I don't like again, I don't want to sound smug. I cannot see Americans doing it in a million years. I can't even get a random guy at a pub to talk about uh, Gaza in terms of this election at all. Right? People I know, people who I think I connect with politically, it's gone. It is absolutely out of their thought process. And that's what we're talking about globally with all the tentacles of this beast. I don't, why? I think they could all be more successful than we have been, but I don't understand how.
Just to wrap up this session, then, the other day I was watching a gathering with Jeffrey Sachs. If I'm not mistaken, it was at Cambridge University.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the level of questions in that talk of Jeffrey Sachs, he was talking, then they opened the podium for those people who want to ask some sort
Yeah,
of question.
that's always a
And
fun.
it's unbelievable when these students were talking about that what's going on in Ukraine is all about democracy.
Mm,
Russia is marching toward the European Union. Who's going to help us? Who's going to fight Russia? And I
these are
think
college students.
college
Cambridge,
students at Cambridge
right,
University,
right.
yeah,
So it's either Cambridge or Oxford, like Harvard
yeah,
and Yale.
Cambridge. And you ask yourself what's happening right now to the universities if these people are that much on it. They don't know what's really going on in their neighborhood.
Yeah,
And how about the role of the universities in the whole situation that we're witnessing right now? Mainstream media is doing its job tremendously. I think they're so successful in what they're doing.
absolutely. This is what we've talked before about the father of American public relations there, and the idea of manufacturing consent, and I think we're seeing everywhere in the West the result of this absolute implosion of university as a bedrock of intellectual development and criminal thought. I mean, critical thought turns into criminal thought. Actually, I got ahead of myself. But you look at, before I went to college in the 70s, when they would ask kids in general, broadly, why are you here? Right. And I'm here to find the meaning of life, to find a purpose in life. And then by the time I graduated in the mid 80s, it had changed so radically that the most common thing was to get a good job. And and of course that was 40 years ago. Now there's no job at all. I mean, it's not, at least people were pretending to study history or literature or something. Now they have these, communications and uh I don't know, international gender communication journal relation studies or something like. And it's basically, how do you spend 4 years to do something so that you're hireable and not part of the working class? In other words, you're not doing something for hourly wages, and instead you become of what Dmitry Orlov has coined office plankton. I just love that term because it's absolutely hilarious and Russian to the core. This a huge, skyscraper full of what? Full of nothing, of people working at nothing. And it is sad when you see it in close up, like the podium that you just mentioned. I remember being at one at MIT here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with Noam Chomsky talking about manufactured consent, all this stuff. And there were Israeli students who were lined up, and there were shouting matches going on. And I was, I was like, what are these people saying? Who are they? And why? That doesn't make any sense. What you just said ignores, I don't just know, like, bushels of truth. And I'm, I have to admit that I'm a little biased, or at least I think that Americans in general, we do enough to stomp all over the world. So I have a soft spot for Europeans as maybe a little more effete or more intellectual, more, their universities are probably doing a better job than ours, because I see this every day, and I see it with kids, and my wife and I are trying to create kids that actually ask questions and actually think about what they're saying and what they're deciding. But especially right now, what I see in the European theater is exactly like you say. It's unbelievable. It is just beyond, like, how could you be going to university and you ask those questions? I don't know, but it is the ripe fruit. You look at remember the graph I had a couple of weeks ago was about public perception in France. It sounds like it would be American, because this whole people were convinced by the CIA, basically, that the Russians were most responsible for beating the Nazis in 1957, whatever. And then by 1994, it was equally the Americans who started the month before, like in June of 1944. And how could they have been so instrumental if they didn't even get there until the last chapter? But these were the sons and daughters of people who lived through it, who managed to be sculpted like that instead. So I think that we have to think of, Bernays being really from the 20s. It's a century long study. It is getting worse, and I agree with you. I really think that there is something wrong with what universities think that they're doing, and there's something that is inherently related to the control of capital, that they are basically just combing a workforce. They need people who are going to be good workers, which now means obedient, not engaging in very much critical thinking, accepting the authority and doing what they're told. That sort of thing is extremely important now more than ever. But I do see it as the logical consequence of that chain. Do you see what I mean? That because the thing in France was between 1957 and 1994, right? The one that I was talking about at MIT was in, I don't know, the 90s. Like this has been in Bernays' brilliant scheme to sell the cigarettes to women as the torches of freedom was in the 20s. So it's been going on forever. I think what you said about the success of the press is amazing, but I think that's why what we're doing, and I really respect you for doing this, having all of these people to talk and just say what makes sense, that you never hear on mainstream media. And the spark that I see of a tiny bit of hope is that there is so much more of this happening than there had been for many years, and so little, really little respect. Not little enough not to get those kids standing up with their idiot questions, But no one under 40 is watching CNN. They don't like it. It doesn't mean anything to them. I mean, and you're kind of thrown to the wolves. And who do you listen to? What do you learn? Who is telling me what to think? But it's the beginning of a detachment from this thought system. The universities, the press, and the politicians, everything that works in that way to kind of zombify the populace. And I don't know. I hope we're making some progress. How's that?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Boa noite again.
Boa noite.